Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Angie. I am a 43-year-old wife and working mom of two, living in the Midwest with a hectic lifestyle and just trying to make it all work. Today I wanted to talk about getting back to basics, and specifically the basics of foundation. So I didn't wear foundation or to be fair, I wore a powder foundation for over 10 years. I never strayed from it. I had tried a liquid foundation once, like 15 years ago, and I hated it. I hated the way it felt on my skin. I felt like I was wearing a mask. I just hated it. And so I never tried again. And after I turned 40, I realized that this powder foundation just wasn't working for me. And I had to, kind of dive back in and say, all right, let's find a liquid foundation that works for you. And the reality is I made a ton of mistakes. And so over the last 2 years, I've thought about, okay, what were the questions that I should have answered before I went shopping for foundation? And I came up with 4. I think there's 4 questions that you should be able to answer before you go searching for a foundation. And if you can answer those 4 questions, then your chances of finding a foundation that is right for you, that looks good on you and makes you feel good, makes you feel like yourself, then your chances are a lot higher of being able to do that. So the first of the 4 questions is the easiest, and that is, what is your skin tone? Now, this sounds easy, but the reality is we don't all know our skin tone. And I am a perfect example of this. So the different skin tones, you can be fair, light, medium, dark, and deep. And obviously there's a lot of in between there. But I first went shopping for foundation. I walked into a drugstore. I went up to a foundation display and I saw the 20, 30 shades that were there. And I was like, well, I'm light, I'm light skinned. And I came home with a light foundation and I put it on my face and I was like, oh no. I am apparently not light, and I am not light. I am fair. I am almost see-through, actually. I am very fair, but I just didn't know any better. So there's a few different things you can do for this. Ask your friends. Say, do you think I'm light? Do you think I'm fair? Pay attention to other women. I think I just wasn't very detail-oriented, and I wasn't very paying attention to details. But the other things you can do, in a perfect world, pre-COVID, we could go and go get a shade match, right? You can see my dog walking around. She's hanging out with me and she's just got up from her nap. Just walked by in the corner. Her name's Reggae, by the way. But in a perfect world before COVID, you could go and get a shade match, right? You could have someone say, oh yeah, you're really light and I'll shade match you. But that's not really happening anymore. At Sephora, they will shade match you on plexiglass, which is helpful, but not perfect. My tip is, go into the drugstore, go find a very inexpensive foundation. e.l.f. has some inexpensive foundations, LA Girl, and there's others. And pick up a $5 foundation and take it home, and maybe take 2 shades home and say, all right, where am I? Am I light? Am I medium? Or, and kind of get a good sense of where to start. Because I think if you know where to start, then that helps you from taking a shade range of a brand that's 30 to 40 and kind of shrink it down to maybe 3 to 7 shades. And that's going to help you a lot. The second question that I wish I would have known the answer to is, what is your undertone? Now, this is not nearly as intuitive, frankly, and it can be really confusing for a lot of women. So there's a few different tips and tricks you can use to figure out what your undertone is. So first and foremost, there are 3 main undertones. There is what's called a warm undertone. This is also referred to as a yellow undertone. And these are women who have a little bit of yellow underneath their skin. The second undertone is a cool undertone. This is the exact opposite. These are women who have kind of pink underneath their skin. And then of course there's neutral. And what that means is you don't have a lot of yellow or a lot of pink underneath your skin. And you know, there are some variations in between, but basically those are the three main undertones. Now, there's a few different tricks you can use to figure out what your undertone is. The first one is, well, look at the veins in your wrists or on your chest. If they are blue or blue purplish, you are more than likely a cool undertone. If they are kind of greenish, then more than likely you are a warm undertone. And if you have a combination of the two, or you can hardly see the veins underneath your skin, then more than likely you're neutral. The next thing you can do is open up your jewelry box. If you own mostly yellow gold because you feel that that works best on your skin, well, you're more than likely warm tone. Because if you have warm tone and have some yellow underneath your skin, yellow gold is going to look best on you. If you are like, oh God, no, I never wear yellow gold, I only wear white gold or sterling silver, well, more than likely you're cool toned, because that tends to look better on women who have cool toned skin. And finally, if you open your jewelry box and you got a big mix and match of everything and it's all about your mood, you look good in both, well then good for you. You're probably neutral. Other things you can do, think about how you tan. Or burn for that matter. If you are one of those people who are like, yeah, I don't tan, I only burn. And what's even worse is I burn and then I go back to being pale. Well, then you're cool toned. If you tan easily, then you're more than likely warm toned. If you're neutral, you can tan, but you tend to burn first. And then you tan. So that makes you more likely to be neutral toned. And finally, you know, you can grab a white sheet of paper or put on a white t-shirt. If you have warm toned skin, a lot of times you're not going to want to wear stark white. You tend to look better in off-white. If you are cool toned, you can usually wear stark white. And again, if you're neutral, you can go with either. You can wear stark white or you can wear kind of off-white as well. The next question we need to ask ourselves is, what coverage are you looking for? And this is really, really important because I just talked about, you went to the drugstore, you walked up to the foundation area and you're looking at a brand and you say, okay, I've now taken that shade range and I brought it down to 3 to 7 shades, and then, oh, I know my undertone, so now I've even brought that further back down to maybe 2 or 3 shades. And now you have to figure out, is that foundation even going to work for you at all? And it's about what you're looking for. So there's kind of 3 categories of foundations. There's full coverage foundation, there's light to medium, commonly called buildable foundation, and then there's more sheer foundations. So full coverage foundations are exactly what they sound like. They are full coverage. They are meant to cover hyperpigmentation. They're meant to cover acne scarring. They're a lot of redness. You know, you may very well like a full coverage if you're trying to cover a lot. Now, just because something is full coverage doesn't mean it's gonna, not look like skin, or it's gonna look like you're wearing a mask. Even if you're wearing full coverage foundation, if you are doing it correctly and picking the right shade, yeah, you're gonna look like you have makeup on, but it's still gonna look incredibly flattering. It's not gonna look like you're wearing a mask. Light to medium buildable is kind of what it sounds like. It's in the middle. It's my favorite coverage. I don't need to cover everything. I kind of want to even things out, cover a little bit, but I find full coverage foundation sometimes a little trickier with my skill level. So I do like the light to medium coverage. And then of course there's your really sheer coverage, and these are all commonly called skin tints. Tinted moisturizers fall in this range. Some BB and CC creams do as well. However, there are some BB and CC creams that are full coverage, they look like spackle. So just because it's a BB or CC cream doesn't make it sheer coverage, but I would say a good percentage of them are. And these are just meant to kind of even things out a little bit. They're not going to provide a lot of coverage, but you know, for some women, that's what they're looking for. And some of it may be season, you know, in the summer, because I have combination oily skin and I get more oily in the summer. I love wearing tinted moisturizers or BB creams or something really light, or a skin tint, because I want no fuss, no muss. I want to be out the door and I don't want to worry about makeup melting off my face all day. So, but as we get into the fall and winter, I tend to really kind of push towards that medium coverage, and even sometimes full coverage. You know, if I have a special occasion, if I'm going to a wedding, if I'm going out, then I'm more likely going to want to wear a more full coverage that's long lasting. And then the last question we need to ask ourselves is what finish we're looking for, because finish is just as important as coverage. Now, some of this is going to be personal preference, especially if you have normal skin. If you have normal skin, well, congratulations, you won the skin lottery. You can do whatever you want. So you may like a more matte finish. You may like a super, super glowy, radiant finish. It's really going to be dependent on what you feel looks good on you and what you like, you know, what's your preference. At the same time, for those of us who did not win the skin lottery, right here, I have combination oily skin, and it somewhat is dependent on the weather. In the summer, my skin gets more and more oily. In the winter, especially living in the Midwest, we have brutal winters, and I tend to get a lot more dryness in my skin, but I still maintain my oily T-zone. And because of that, I have to steer clear of a lot of those hydrating, luminous, radiant, glowy foundations. These are all key words that I tend to run screaming from, because more than likely they're not going to work for my skin. Now, there are a few that do, but as a category, especially when we're talking about basics, those are definitely finishes I got to be really, really careful with. The best example of this, when I first wanted to try to find a foundation, yeah, this is what I did. I Googled it, and I Googled top 10 foundations. And I read maybe 5 or 6 articles, or what are the top 10 foundations? And the one that kept coming up over and over and over again was the NARS Natural Radiant Foundation. And I went to Sephora and I got a shade match and I got a little sample and I brought it home and I put it on my face and I was like, oh, this is it. This is beautiful. It was so pretty. The shade was gorgeous. It just made my skin look flawless. I couldn't stop looking at myself. I would go to room and stare at my skin. And I was so happy for an hour. And then, yeah, about an hour, maybe 2. And then I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh my God, what happened? And basically what happened was I had no business wearing that foundation. The foundation was never going to work for me. It was not meant for oily skin. I looked greasy. I basically looked like a disco ball, and it was literally just melting off my face in my T-zone because it just wasn't meant for me. And it broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart. On a side note, I am actually very excited because NARS just launched a soft matte foundation, and I ordered it. I'm waiting for it to arrive, and I will do a foundation challenge on my channel with it. But I am hoping it will heal my broken heart. I'm hoping that it will do what I had hoped the Natural Radiant Foundation would have done for me. So, you know, I've talked about radiant, luminous, all of that. Again, flip side of the coin, you know, if you're oily or combination, you may want a more matte finish. Now, there are absolutely some women out there who are like, oh my God, I hate matte finishes. They're just so lifeless, or they make you look like you're wearing a mask. And the reality is not the right one. There are very matte foundations, but there are also semi-mattes, demi-mattes, satin finishes, things that are still about controlling oil, but they won't give you that very matte type of look. So it's just about trial and error, but it's also about looking for those keywords that are going to help you make a good decision. So I hope this was helpful. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe down below, and I hope to see you soon in my next video. Bye, you guys.